Elevators are simple. They go up, they go down, but only if the man in the machine room knows the language of the hoist. My name is Elmer Wisniewski. I'm 62 years old, and for 35 of those years, I was the chief elevator mechanic for the Empire State Building. I am the man who knows the language. Or, I was. The meeting was on the 85th floor, in an office so new the paint still smelled sharp. The view was spectacular. You could see all the way to the Verrazzano. I'd been in the machine rooms at the top of this building for so long, the view had ceased to be a novelty. It was just the weather. Sebastian Pierce Crawford did not look at the view. He did not look at me. He stared at a glowing laptop screen, his face illuminated in the cold blue light. He was 28 years old, with a fresh Columbia MBA hanging in a severe black frame on the wall behind him. It was the only thing in the room that looked permanent. He wore a black turtleneck, even though it was July. Elmer, he said, the name sounding foreign in his mouth. He still hadn't made eye contact. We're moving into a new paradigm of asset management, a full digital transformation. I stood there in my work trousers and my steel-toed boots, the ones I'd been wearing for the last decade. My hands were clean, but the lines in my knuckles were permanently etched with grease and graphite. They were hands that knew the difference between a worn bearing and a compromised armature just by the vibration through a steel plate. Sebastian had hands that had never held anything heavier than a latte. They were pale and smooth, resting on the keyboard as if it were a concert piano. The board has decided that we need to optimize our human resources, he continued, reading from a script on his screen. We're looking for skill sets that align with the future. IoT fluency, predictive analytics, cloud-based monitoring. I waited. I knew what was coming. I'd seen consultants like him before. They came in with new buzzwords and left with big checks, leaving behind a mess for the people with calloused hands to clean up. Your role, as it currently exists, is being made redundant, he said, finally looking up. His eyes were flat. There was no malice in them, but no humanity either. It was the look of a man performing a function, a software update, deleting a file. Your position has been identified as legacy. Legacy. I had started here in 1988. I was 27 years old, fresh out of the Navy, where I'd spent 8 years keeping the aircraft elevators on the USS Forrestal from dropping fighter jets into the ocean. The machine rooms of this building felt like coming home. They were cavernous, filled with the hum of massive, gearless traction machines installed in 1931. They were dinosaurs, beautiful and terrifying in their power. And I had learned their secrets from a man named Sal Moretti, who had learned them from the men who bolted them to the bedrock. I understand, I said. My voice was steady. A dead calm settled over me. There was no shock. I had known this was inevitable from the day Sebastian was hired. His father was on the board of directors. This job was just a stepping stone on his gilded path. Your severance package is outlined in this folder, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the vast, empty expanse of his desk. It stopped a good 5 feet away from me. It's fairly standard. Human resources will walk you through the details. Your access card will be deactivated at the end of this meeting. The breaking point came in February of this year. That's when Sebastian arrived, not as a manager, but as the newly minted Vice President of Operational Strategy. He walked the machine floors once. He didn't ask a single question about the equipment. He asked why we weren't using a specific brand of diagnostic software he'd read about in a magazine. I told him the software couldn't interface with analog systems built before World War II. He just nodded, a little smirk on his face. That's the legacy thinking we need to move past, he'd said. I took the 2 steps forward and picked up the envelope. It felt thin. 35 years of my life, and it was as thin as a dinner menu. There is one thing, Sebastian, I said. He raised an eyebrow, impatient. What is it? My certification. I kept my tone even. the New York City Department of Buildings Legacy Traction Elevator Certification. It's a specific class of license for pre-war, non-standardized hoist systems. It's required for legal operation of the express cars. He waved a dismissive hand. Yes, HR has a copy of your file. We'll find a replacement with the necessary qualifications. Here's what he didn't know. What nobody in that sterile, air-conditioned office knew. The Legacy Traction Elevator License, DOB Classification 1138-C, was created in 1972. It was a grandfather clause for a handful of buildings, this one chief among them, whose elevator systems were so unique, so custom-built, that modern universal certifications didn't apply. To get one, you had to apprentice for 10 years under a current license holder and then pass a brutal, hands-on exam administered by a DOB inspector who was probably retired by now. Sal Moretti held license number 002. He'd given me my apprenticeship. When he retired in 1998, I took the exam. My license number is 007. For years, there were 3 of us left. Then, old Manny from the Chrysler Building passed away in 2011. And a few years after that, the guy at 40 Wall Street retired to Florida. As far as I knew, I was the last one. License 007. The only one. Good luck with that, I said. I didn't say it with malice. I said it like I was wishing him luck with the weather. It was a simple statement of fact. Your time here is over, Elmer, he said, his voice hardening. He was done with the script. The door is right there. I turned and walked out of his office. I didn't look back. The walk to the service elevator was long. My key card, the one that had given me access to every corner of this vertical city for more than 3 decades, was already dead. The light on the panel flashed red. A young security guard, a kid I'd known since he started, had to swipe me down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. In my locker, I gathered my things. My insulated thermos. A framed picture of my wife, Sarah, and my son, Michael, taken at his college graduation. My personal logbooks, 20 years of handwritten notes on every quirk, every repair, every strange noise the machines had ever made. They were my property. The company had their official computer logs, but the real knowledge was in these worn, spiral-bound notebooks. I took them all. I left the company-issued hard hat. I left the uniform shirts with my name stitched over the pocket. I rode the local elevator down to the lobby, a slow, rumbling ride. The express cars shot past us in the adjacent shafts, their familiar roar a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of something else, a sense of ownership. You can't fire a man from a place he has built. You can only ask him to leave. If you love stories about underdogs who refuse to stay down, and the sweet justice that comes when experience meets arrogance, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Back in 1980, I was a 25-year-old petty officer, second class on the Forrestal. An old supercarrier that creaked and groaned like a haunted house. My world was the number 3 aircraft elevator, a massive steel platform that could lift 2 F-14 Tomcats from the hangar bay to the flight deck in under a minute. It was a hydraulic monster, powered by systems that had been designed in the 50s. The manuals were often wrong, faded, or missing entirely. You learned by listening. You learned by the feel of the deck plates under your feet. You learned from the old chiefs who could diagnose a fluid leak by its smell. It was my first real education in the life of machines. They talk to you, if you're quiet enough to listen. I spent 4 years in that floating city, and by the time I left, I could rebuild a primary hydraulic ram blindfolded. When I got out, New York was tough. I bounced around a few jobs, mostly commercial HVAC. It was fine, but it wasn't the same. The stakes weren't as high. A failed AC unit makes people uncomfortable. A failed carrier elevator sends $60 million of taxpayer property and 2 pilots into the Atlantic. Then, I saw an ad. Elevator mechanic apprentice, major midtown skyscraper. I applied. The interview was with Sal Moretti. He was a small, wiry man in his late 50s, with thick glasses and hands like bundles of steel cables. He didn't ask me about my resume. He took me straight up to the main machine room on the 102nd floor. The room was overwhelming. A dozen massive electric motors, each the size of a small car, sat in neat rows. Giant spools of steel cable, thicker than my arm, snaked up through the ceiling to the sheaves above. The air hummed with contained power. It smelled of ozone and hot metal. Sal pointed to the number 6 express motor. "She's running hot," he yelled over the noise. "Tachometer says RPM is normal. Amps are good. What do you check first?" I didn't know anything about these specific machines, but I knew the principles. "The bearings," I yelled back. "Could be a lubrication issue, or the brake assembly might be dragging." He just stared at me for a long moment. Then he grinned, a flash of white in his weathered face. "You start Monday." For 10 years, I was Sal's shadow. He taught me the building's nervous system. These weren't just any elevators. They were Otis gearless traction machines, Model 1-to-1, the originals. They didn't have gearboxes to multiply torque. They had a massive, slow-turning electric motor directly connected to the main sheave, the big pulley that holds the cables. It was a brutally simple and incredibly robust design, but it required a level of manual tuning and maintenance that was becoming a lost art. Sal was the keeper of that art. He taught me how to read the whispers in the cables, how to balance the cars and counterweights to within 100 pounds, how to file the carbon brushes on the motor generators for perfect contact. "This place is alive, Elmo," he told me one night during a long maintenance shutdown. We were sitting on an upturned bucket, sharing a thermos of coffee. "It breathes. These machines, they have personalities. Number 4 is a workhorse, never complains. Number 7 is temperamental. You got a sweet talker." He was the one who insisted I get the legacy license. "One day, kid," he said, tapping a copy of the city building code, "this little piece of paper is going to be more valuable than the deed to the whole damn building. They'll forget. The suits upstairs, they always forget where the real power comes from. They think it's in their boardrooms. It's not. It's right here, in this room." He was right. I took the exam in 1998. The inspector was a grizzled old man named Finnegan, who made me disassemble and reassemble a governor assembly from a 1930s schematic. I passed. Sal retired the next day, handing me his personal set of micrometers. "She's your baby now," he'd said. For the next 24 years, she was. I was there for the 2003 blackout. The entire city went dark. The building's backup generators kicked in, but they were only rated to power emergency lighting and one service elevator. The problem was the automatic transfer switch failed. The generators were running, but the power wasn't getting to the elevator control panel. It took me 20 minutes, working by flashlight in a sweltering sub-basement, to diagnose the problem and manually jumper the connection. For the next 12 hours, while the city was a dark, silent monolith, Service Car 12 was the only thing moving in this building, bringing water and supplies to the tenants who were stranded in their offices and ferrying emergency personnel. My boss at the time, a decent man named Frank, told the board I had single-handedly prevented a dozen lawsuits and a public relations nightmare. I got a $5,000 bonus and a plaque. I put the money toward my son's college fund. The plaque is still in a box somewhere. I sacrificed for this job. Missed anniversaries because a motor generator set was throwing sparks. Left my son's high school baseball games halfway through because a car was trapped between floors. Sarah, my wife, she understood, but it cost us. It cost me time I can never get back. My relationship with Michael was strained for years. I was the provider, the man who kept the lights on, but I was also the ghost who was never home for dinner. I did it because it was my duty. The building, the machines, they depended on me. Then came Sebastian. He wasn't the first MBA to try and reinvent the wheel, but he was the most arrogant. He saw my 35 years of experience not as an asset, but as a liability. I was entrenched. I was resistant to change. I was legacy. In his first week, he held a town hall for the entire facilities department. He stood in front of a PowerPoint presentation filled with charts and buzzwords. Synergy, optimization, leveraging assets. He talked about the building as if it were a portfolio of stocks, not a living, breathing entity of steel and stone. He pointed to a picture of the machine room on the screen. "This is a relic," he said. "We need to move to a predictive, IoT-based maintenance schedule. We need to replace this outdated hardware with smart systems that report their own status to the cloud." A young mechanic named Ricky raised his hand. "Sir, these are direct drive DC motors from 1931. There's nothing to connect to the cloud. They don't have circuit boards. Their operating system is graphite and copper." Sebastian just smiled that infuriatingly smug smile. "Then we'll retrofit. Or we'll replace. The point is to get the human element, the guesswork, out of the equation." The guesswork. I thought about the thousands of tiny adjustments, the intuitive checks, the listening and feeling and smelling that kept this place running. The knowledge that wasn't in any manual, the knowledge that only existed in my head and in my hands. He wanted to replace all of that with an app. I knew my days were numbered. I didn't fight it. You can't reason with a man who thinks a spreadsheet is the same as reality. You just wait. You watch. And you remember what Sal told you about where the real power is. I stepped out of the grand lobby onto 34th Street. The city noise hit me like a physical blow after the quiet hum of the building. I walked past my old 1994 Chevy Astro van parked in its usual spot on the corner, a special permit on the dash that was now useless. I didn't feel like driving. I needed to think. I walked to Herald Square and took the N train home to Astoria. The ride was loud, screeching, and packed. I stood, holding onto a pole, the manila envelope tucked under my arm. The train rattled over the bridge, the familiar panorama of the Queensboro and the Manhattan skyline laid out before me. I could see my building, my tower. It stood there, impassive, catching the afternoon sun. Anger is a hot, useless emotion. It burns you out. What I felt was different. It was a cold clarity. A switch had been flipped. For 35 years, my primary function was to keep the elevators running, no matter what. That function had just been terminated. My new function was to protect myself. I mentally ran through the systems. Sebastian wanted optimization. He'd probably try to cut down on the manual inspection cycles. The younger mechanics were good kids, but they were trained on modern systems. They didn't have the touch for the old girls. I knew for sure, 3 weeks ago, this was coming. Sebastian had brought in a team from Schindler, one of the big elevator conglomerates. They walked the machine rooms with him. I saw their lead engineer, a guy in a crisp polo shirt, just shake his head. I overheard him telling Sebastian, "This is museum-grade stuff. Our guys aren't certified for this. Nobody is. You need the guy with the DOB legacy ticket." Sebastian had just brushed him off. "We're exploring all options," he'd said. He was arrogant. He assumed the rules could be bent. He assumed my certification was a trivial piece of paper, a bureaucratic checkbox that could be easily replicated or bypassed. He didn't understand that some rules are written in stone and steel. I got off at my stop in Astoria and walked the 6 blocks to my house. It's a small brick row house Sarah and I bought in 1992. I walked in the door. Sarah was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She looked up, surprised. "Elmo, what are you doing home so early?" I put the thin manila envelope on the counter. "I got retired," I said. She stopped chopping. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then back at me. She didn't say, "What happened?" or "Are you okay?" She knew me too well for that. She wiped her hands on a towel, came over, and put a hand on my arm. "Okay," she said. "What's the plan?" "The plan," I said, "is to wait." That same evening, Sebastian Pierce Crawford was composing a triumphant email to the entire executive board. The subject line: Phase 1 of operational optimization complete. He wrote about streamlining legacy positions, enhancing efficiency, and pivoting towards a data-driven future. He felt a surge of satisfaction. He had removed a major obstacle. The old man, Wisniewski, was an anchor holding them in the past. Now, they were free to sail into the glorious, connected future. He hit send and leaned back in his chair, putting his expensive Italian leather shoes up on the desk that was, until that morning, far too big for him. He was no longer just the VP of strategy. He was the man in charge. He had already placed a call to a national elevator service company, a competitor to Schindler. He'd used his father's name to get the regional director on the phone. He'd demanded a team on site tomorrow morning to begin a full diagnostic and modernization assessment. The director, eager to poach a high-profile client, agreed instantly, assuring Sebastian they could handle anything. It was a lie. His company had no one with an 1138C license either, but that was a detail for the lawyers to sort out later. For now, it was a sale. Sebastian didn't care about the details. He had authority. That was all that mattered. Meanwhile, in my basement workshop in Astoria, I laid out my old logbooks on my workbench. I flipped through the pages, the familiar scent of old paper and graphite filling the air. October 17th, 2018. Express car number 4. Faint shudder on deceleration approaching 65th floor. Counterweight guide rails need realignment. Check lubrication levels on secondary governor cable. January 22nd, 2020. Express car number 6. Motor generator brushes showing increased wear. Patched for now. Full replacement needed within 18 to 24 months. March 12th, 2023. Main sheave, car number 2. Minor slippage detected under heavy load. Cleaned and regrooved. Monitor cable tension daily for 1 week. This was the guesswork Sebastian was so eager to eliminate. It wasn't guesswork. It was data. Decades of it. It just wasn't stored on a cloud. It was stored in my head and on these pages. I knew the building's breaking points. I knew that without the daily, weekly, monthly rituals of maintenance I performed, the system wouldn't just fail. It would fail in specific, predictable ways. Express car number 4's guide rails would cause it to trip its own safety brakes if it hit a certain speed. The worn brushes on car number 6's generator would eventually cause a power fluctuation big enough to knock it offline completely. The delicate balance of the whole system was predicated on constant expert intervention. My intervention. I closed the books. I went upstairs. Sarah had made my favorite, pork chops and sauerkraut. We ate at the kitchen table. For the first time in 35 years, I didn't have one ear cocked for the phone to ring. The silence was profound. The first call came the next day at 3:47 p.m. It was Ricky, the young mechanic. He sounded panicked. "Elmo, thank God. It's car 4. It's stuck. Stuck fast between 65 and 66. The safeties are tripped. We can't get it to move." "Did you check the guide rails?" I asked calmly. "The what?" "Sebastian has the guys from Apex Elevators here. They're looking at the control board. They say it's a software glitch." I almost laughed. "Ricky, that car doesn't have software. It has relays and wires. The problem isn't in the panel. It's in the shaft. These Apex guys won't let us touch anything. They say it's their scene now, but they don't know what they're doing, Elmo. They're just staring at the motor." There was a commotion in the background. I heard Sebastian's sharp voice. "Who are you talking to? Get off the phone." The line went dead. An hour later, at 4:55 p.m., my phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message, when I checked it, was from the building's general manager, A man named Henderson I'd worked with for 15 years. He sounded like he was having a heart attack. Elmo, for God's sake, call me. We have a major situation. Car 4 is still down, and now Car 6 just went offline. Shuttered to a halt at the 80th floor. We've got people trapped. High-level tenants. Lawyers from Sterling, Cooper, and Price. They're talking about breach of contract. The collapse was beginning, exactly as I knew it would. The two most temperamental cars, the ones that required the most finessing, were the first to go. The team from Apex was useless. They were plumbers trying to perform brain surgery. They probably took one look at the 1931-era motor generator sets and their jaws hit the floor. Worse, their lawyers likely told them that without a certified 138C mechanic on site, if they touched anything and made it worse, their liability would be astronomical. So they did nothing. The phones in the management office would be melting down. Security would be overwhelmed with calls from panicked tenants. The story would hit the news by morning. Chaos at the Empire State Building. My phone rang again. It was Sebastian. I recognized the number from the office directory. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. Finally, it stopped. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking a glass of iced tea. Sarah was watching her shows in the living room. The house was quiet. Outside, the sun was setting over Queens. Across the river, I knew a different kind of sunset was happening. The sunset of Sebastian Pierce Crawford's meteoric career. At 7:15 p.m., a black town car pulled up in front of my house. I watched from the window as a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize got out. He was holding a briefcase. He walked up my front steps and rang the bell. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, my cell phone rang. A blocked number. This time I answered. I said nothing. Mr. Wisniewski? Elmer? The voice was strained, tight, with a level of stress that costs men like him millions in healthcare. It was Arthur Blackwood, the majority owner of the building management group. A man I had met exactly twice in 35 years. This is he, I said. Elmer, we have a catastrophic failure in progress. I'm sure you've heard. 2 express elevators are down. We have people trapped. Important people. I heard, I said. There was a pause. He was waiting for me to offer to help. I waited for him to ask. My vice president of strategy, Mr. Pierce Crawford, seems to be unable to resolve the situation, Blackwood said, the words dripping with ice. He tells me the external contractors are refusing to engage the equipment. They cite some obscure city regulation, a certification. It's not obscure, Mr. Blackwood, I said, my voice level. It's New York City Department of Buildings Code, Section 1138, Paragraph C, the Legacy Systems Maintenance Requirement. It mandates that any pre-war, non-standardized vertical transport system, like the express elevators in your building, must be serviced and maintained under the direct supervision of a Class 1138C licensed mechanic. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could hear the gears turning in his billion-dollar brain. I could hear him processing the words mandates and licensed and required. And you are, he finally managed to ask. I am license holder number 007, I said. And according to the DOB registry, which your lawyers can check, I am the only active 1138C license holder remaining in the 5 boroughs. The intake of breath on his end was sharp. The full scope of the disaster had just landed on him. It wasn't a mechanical failure anymore. It was a legal crisis. Every second, those elevators were inoperable. While the building was technically not in compliance, his liability grew exponentially. The lawyers trapped on the 80th floor would be drafting the lawsuit in their heads right now. What do you want, Elmer? He asked. The question was quiet. All the bluster was gone. It was the sound of total defeat. This was the moment, the culmination of 35 years of loyalty and 1 day of disrespect. The balancing of the scales. First, I said, Sebastian Pierce Crawford is to be terminated. Not asked to resign. Terminated for cause. Gross negligence endangering tenant safety and exposing the company to catastrophic liability. I want you to send me an email confirming his termination before this phone call is over. I heard him talking to someone in the background. Do it. Now. Fire him. Get him out of my sight. Second, I continued, my position was made redundant. I am no longer an employee. I am now a consultant. My services are available for a fee. Name it, Blackwood said instantly. My consulting and retention fee is $4 million, I said. That's a one-time payment to secure my exclusive services for the next 5 years. My title will be Executive Director of Vertical Transport. I will report directly to you. I will have full authority over all elevator and hoist operations, including budget, staffing, and procurement. I will choose my own successor and my own team. Another long pause. I could hear him doing the math. 4 million versus the tens of millions in lawsuits and lost leases he was facing. It wasn't even a choice. Done, he said. One last thing, Mr. Blackwood. I want Sebastian's office, the one on the 85th floor, with the view. I heard a dry, humorless chuckle on the other end. It's yours, Elmer. Just get down here, please. I'll be there as soon as I receive the email confirming Mr. Crawford's termination, I said, and hung up. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Arthur Blackwood's personal account. The subject was termination. The body was simple. This email confirms that as of 7:28 p.m. today, Sebastian Pierce Crawford's employment with the company has been terminated for cause. We look forward to seeing you. I showed the phone to Sarah. She read it, then looked at me, and a slow smile spread across her face. You should probably get your tool belt, she said. I didn't rush. I took my time. I changed into a clean set of work clothes. I packed my old leather tool belt, the one Sal had given me, with the specific wrenches and gauges I would need. I grabbed my most important logbook. Then I went out to my old Chevy Astro. It started on the first try, the engine rumbling with a familiar, reliable rhythm. I backed out of my driveway and headed for the Queensboro Bridge. Traffic into Manhattan was light. As I drove up the ramp, the skyline glittered ahead of me. The Empire State Building was the crown jewel, its spire lit up in white. My building. I pulled up to the service entrance on 33rd Street. The head of security, a man I'd had coffee with 1,000 times, was waiting for me on the sidewalk. He looked immensely relieved. Elmo, he said, opening my van door, I've never been so happy to see this ugly van in my life. Good to see you too, Jim, I said. As I walked through the service corridor, the word had already spread. Maintenance workers, security guards, custodians. They nodded at me. Not just a friendly nod. It was a nod of deep, profound respect. The old king was returning to his castle. Jim handed me a new ID badge. It was a gold-colored all-access card. My picture was already on it. Underneath my name, it read, Executive Director, Vertical Transport. I didn't go to the 85th floor. Not yet. I went straight to the machine room for the express cars. The moment I walked in, the frantic energy ceased. The Apex crew, looking lost and useless, parted like the Red Sea. Ricky and the other in-house guys just looked at me, waiting. I didn't say a word. I walked to the control panel for car number 4, opened it, and bypassed the tripped safety circuit with a jumper from my pocket. Then I turned to Ricky. Get a harness. Go down the shaft to the 65th floor. The guide rails on the east side are out of alignment by a 1/4 inch. Nudge them back and tighten the bolts. Use the torque wrench from my red toolbox. He just stared at me. How did you know? Because I was listening for the last 6 months, I said. Then I turned to the panel for car number 6. The brushes on this motor generator are shot. That's why it went down. We're going to have to swap them out. I was home. 6 months later, the view from the 85th floor is still spectacular. I had Sebastian's ridiculously large desk replaced with a solid oak workbench. My old logbooks are lined up on the credenza, where his pretentious art books used to be. The framed Columbia MBA is gone, replaced by a framed schematic of the original 1931 Otis hoist motor. I hired 2 new apprentices, both young veterans, one from the Army, one from the Navy. They're sharp, respectful, and they listen. I'm teaching them the language of the machines, just like Sal taught me. Ricky is my second in command. He's got the touch. He'll be ready to take the 1138C exam in a few years, if I can convince the DOB to administer it again. My salary is now $450,000 a year, which was Arthur Blackwood's idea. The $4 million was transferred to my bank account the day after the incident. It's my I don't have to take this anymore fund. I come in 3 days a week. I'm on call, but I'm not a slave to the building anymore. The systems are running better than they have in years because they finally have the budget and the staff they always needed. As for Sebastian, I heard he was last seen interviewing for a junior analyst position at a real estate firm in New Jersey. His father, embarrassed by the whole affair, was quietly removed from the board. Last night I drove home at 5 o'clock. I was in my Astoria kitchen by 6, just as Sarah was putting dinner on the table. We ate together. Afterwards, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and watched the sky darken. I didn't think about work. I didn't listen for the phone. The silence was no longer profound. It was just peaceful. They thought firing me was the end of the story. They thought experience was a liability and loyalty was a line item on a budget. They were wrong. Loyalty is a two-way street. And some assets, the ones built over a lifetime of duty and sacrifice, don't show up on a spreadsheet. They show up when everything else breaks down. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of quiet competence and loud victory.